completed the 6 technical sessions in this series, which were full of knowledge and learning for all of us. And for the final 2 sessions today, we have 2 very eminent speakers amongst us on this topic, litigation practice in GST. The definition of genius is about taking the complex and making it simple, said the genius himself, Sir Albert Einstein. Friends, for GST, we have a renowned jury of 2 GST geniuses amongst us today at the final sessions of this workshop, Advocate Sailesh Seth and CAV Raghuraman, who are both practicing advocates and shall generously share their learnings and knowledge in this field with all of us today. Friends, let me take this opportunity to introduce before you our first speaker for today's session, Advocate Sailesh Seth from Mumbai, who is a practicing advocate. Advocate Sailesh Seth has over 30 years of experience in consulting, advisory, and litigation practice in the field of indirect tax laws, including central excise, service tax, customs, states VAT laws, CST, and now GST. He is one of the partners in the legal firm Messrs. RVS Legal, having its base in Chennai, Bangalore, and Mumbai. Mr. V. Raghuraman, Advocate Bangalore, and Mr. K. Vaitheshwaran, Advocate from Chennai, are the 2 other partners in this firm. This boutique firm specializes in direct taxation, direct tax, international taxation, arbitration, corporate laws, including IBC, drafting and vetting of commercial contracts, and other fields as well. Advocate Sailesh Seth has been a regular faculty at various professional bodies as well as trade bodies on his chosen field. He has already delivered more than 90 lectures since April 17 on various aspects of GST all over India. He is a regular columnist in the bi-weekly business newspaper Vyapar of Janambhumi Group on service tax, central excise, and GST, and has also contributed a number of articles to various magazines as well as taxation websites like TIOL, etc. His Knowledge e-series, TaxWire, is a very popular read amongst learners like us. He is a very humble senior and guide who's full of modesty, besides being a full warehouse of knowledge and learning on this subject. Friends, I invite him for taking over this session for the benefit of all of us. I present before you Advocate Sailesh Seth. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Ragini, for your kind and appreciative words. I really wouldn't call myself genius, but yes, I'm a learner, and we are all learners, and we are bound to be learners till the end of our life or till we decide to remain in the profession. So it's a journey together, to be very frank. And when we exchange the ideas and when we share, our understanding about any topic, I'm sure both sides would be learning. So, and this journey is journey of GST is going to be quite exciting, interesting, at times even frustrating as well. But still, since we have decided to embark upon this journey, then let us make it as much interesting as possible. And from that perspective, when I look at it, this litigation focus workshop, which is very well planned by Guwahati chapter, and I must congratulate the chapter for this. And when I see this, I'm sure that this particular workshop on this litigation focus workshop or the development skills could not have come at a much better time. It was a need of the hour, and it will also make our understanding and our crave to learn about this GST that much stronger, that much I'm sure. My predecessor learned faculties, I'm sure, must have dealt with their respective topics and made them understanding. What I really find it, before I come to my topic, that there are large number of chartered accountants particularly and erstwhile tax practitioners who may not be holding the CA degree, but who are otherwise who have been practicing as STP and ITP in indirect taxes. They have all joined the GST regime as a practitioners. Now, it is good, and I always welcome it, because it is in fact the inherent responsibility of the professionals to embark upon the new field. They have to charter a new course. if I have been traditionally practicing in income tax or direct tax, and if I feel that indirect tax may offer, present to me much more challenging opportunities, then I must really try for that. The other aspect of this is that indirect tax is a absolutely different ball game from the direct tax. The traditional way we have been looking at the tax practice, particularly in direct tax, may not really help you too much beyond a limit when you encounter any problems, particularly litigation-oriented issues in indirect tax. And here, normally I see that the chartered accountants, much as they may try, but as I see that normally they are lacking into some basic fundamental understanding that how the litigation process really evolve and how does it progress under indirect tax. And even from that perspective, this litigation focus workshop could not have come at a better time. Friends, we may have to really take rid of so many notions which are prevalent which are there in our mind. Some age-old ideas, some fixed, belief, our understanding, and our normal way of doing the thing of handling an assignment, particularly litigation, which we have been traditionally doing. All these things may have to be either we may have to get rid of them, or we may have to have a very, very hard look at them. That am I really, am I really dealing with the subject? Am I dealing with the assignment in the manner in which I am supposed to? So, and from that angle, if you see, today the topic, one of the most important aspects of the GST, and for that matter, any indirect tax, be it customs, excise, or service tax in particular, we would be deliberating upon those particular topics, which is summons, investigation, offenses, and arrest and prosecution under GST laws. Originally, the topics which were also, I was supposed to cover the topics relating to the search, seizure, attachment, and special recovery provisions of under the GST. However, after I had a word with Ragini and Manoj, I told them it may not be really advisable to cover cover all the topics within 1.5 hours. These are all important topics, and they are topics by themselves. So today I would confine myself to summons, investigation, arrest, and prosecution. The rest of the topics, I'm sure the committee of the Guwahati chapter will take a call on it, and they will say that in the near future, they will also see that the deliberations take place, whether by me or somebody, that is not important. But yes, those topics are very important, and they may require anywhere between 2 to 3 hours. So with these opening remarks, let me now take you through this extremely, I wouldn't call it interesting, but extremely painful but important journey of this investigation and summons and everything to in another next 1.5 hours. Ragini, can you share the PPT, please? Friends, this PowerPoint presentation, none of you need to really bother about taking the screenshots or anything. I'm sure either it must have been shared with you or it will be shared by the chapter with all the participants when the talk is over. Come straight to 4th slide. Next. Yes. Now, before the first few slides, about 20-25 slides are covering only the extracts of the relevant statutory provisions of CGST Act and also of Central Excise Act, of Customs Act, of Finance Act, as well as Indian Penal Code and Civil Procedure Code to the extent necessary. Now, let me just explain to you in the beginning in a few words that litigation process can either start as an armchair process from the department perspective, from the revenue officer perspective, or it can be also an on-the-spot, beginning. On-the-spot means where there is an investigation, and also when the premises, registered premises or other premises pertaining to the taxpayers may be visited, there may be a search is carried out, inquiry is carried out at those registered premises. Normally based on some information that there has been some contravention of the provisions of law leading to the loss of revenue. This loss of revenue can either be in the form of the non-payment of tax or short payment of tax, resulting from either the non-declaration of the value of the supplies, that is normally as we call it a clandestine removal or clandestine activities, or it can be due to classification, it can be due to valuation, it can be due to the wrong availment of exemption notification for whatever reason, or it can be even the wrong availment of the input tax credit, or it can be the wrong utilization of input tax credit. In some cases, it can even be the wrong, obtaining the wrong refund also. So these are the basic, the issues, and based on which the jurisdictional authorities or preventive or anti-evasion or DGGI, Director General of GST and Intelligence, they may actually, in fact, undertake a visit to the premises, scan through the records, withdraw the records, and after withdrawal of the records and after taking the statements, they may, issue a show cause notice. The same thing can also happen even by where the officer sitting in his cabin after going through the returns filed by the taxpayer and on the scrutiny of the, I'm not talking about the assessment. There is no assessment as such as we understood traditionally. There is no such assessment under GST. But on the scrutiny of the returns, the officer may find that there has been some contravention, again leading to the loss of revenue. All these may result into the show cause notice under Section 73. And if there is a evasion charge due to willful suppression or misdeclaration or fraud, then Section 74 provisions may come into the play. Generally, any such premises, normally as we call it in a popular jargon, when they are raided by the revenue officers, generally then the investigation starts with the summons. And today, what is this process of summons? What is the summons? What is the meaning of the summons? What is the scope of the summons? And how do we deal with the summons? What happens after the summons, the inquiry, which is initiated through summons, is completed? All these aspects we will see. So in short, summons is the beginning from where the actual investigation process starts, which later on may convert into, normally it gets converted into a dispute between the taxpayer and the department, and that dispute, and from there the litigation process starts. Now, so as a matter of fact, summons or such investigation or inquiry are incidentally the most preparatory stage, most important and crucial stage, because once the show cause notice is issued, please listen to me very carefully. Once the show cause notice is issued by the department, then that is practically the end of the matter. Department cannot do anything to this show cause notice. They will have to rely upon those show cause notice and the allegations made in the show cause notice right up to Supreme Court. And whatever replies are filed by the taxpayer to that show cause notice, the party will also, taxpayer will also have to rely upon those reply right up to Supreme Court, as a matter of fact. However, what comes into the show cause notice, the charges, how strong the charges are actually built up by the department in the show cause notice, generally would depend upon how he has handled, the taxpayer has handled the inquiry, which is initiated through the summons. Or it need not be every time the summons, but basically during the inquiry or investigation process, how the taxpayer has handled that aspect. So otherwise, most of the time, one would find that the bridge is already burnt behind him by the taxpayer while he was dealing with the inquiry and investigation. So with this question in the mind, let us come straight to the topic. I will, wherever required, I will be referring to the statutory provision. Ragini, please come to slide number 35. Yes. Now, if you see section 70, the summons is always issued under section 70. Section 62B deals with the jurisdiction of the CGST officers vis-a-vis the SGST officers when some inquiry or investigation is undertaken by either of them. I'll come to that whenever particular that topic I will be dealing with that. Section 2 subsection 25 defines the term commissioner in board, and section 2 subsection 91 defines the term proper officer. These are the four major sections, fundamental sections, which would come, which would keep on coming into our overall discussion. The other relevant circulars are these three circulars. Circular dated 5/7/2017 actually is the circular by which the commissioner in board has assigned the functions to the respective officers, nominating them as a proper officer. And it also includes the section 70. FAQ on GST, wherever required, we will make a reference to that. This is the third edition, 15 December 2018, issued by the CBIC, Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. And there are two other circulars. These two circulars are in relation to the DIN, document identification number. We'll also refer to that whenever required. Next, please. Next. Now, if we read the section 70, which is actually on the page number 8, power to summon, it says that the proper officer under this act shall have power to summon any person. Now, please mark the word proper officer, power to summon any person whose attendance he considered necessary either to give evidence or to produce a document or any other thing in any inquiry in the same manner as provided in the case of civil court under the provisions of the Code of Civil Procedure. Every such inquiry, subsection 2 of section 70 says, every such inquiry shall be considered to be deemed to be the judicial proceedings. Now, if you carefully compare the language of section 70 of the CGST Act with the erstwhile provisions of section 14 of the Central Excise Act and section 108, the current Customs Act, under section 14, summons power to issue summons were given under the Central Excise under section 14. Similarly, the power to issue summons, the provisions were contained under section 108 of the Customs Act. Section 83 of the Finance Act made certain provisions of Central Excise applicable to service tax. And by that, section 14 of the Excise Act was also made applicable to service tax. So under Finance Act relating to service tax, there was no specific provision for the issue of summons because in the Act, section 14 of the Central Excise Act was adopted. So that is the overall structure. Now, when you compare section 14 and section 108, already I have actually are part of my earlier slides, but I'm not referring to them. The one difference you would find when you compare that section 14 and section 108, when you compare them, then you will find that in section 14, there were exemptions under section 132 and 133 of the CPC were made applicable. In other words, while the proper officer was invested with the powers to summon any person, however, it was subject to exemption under section 132 and 133 of the Civil Procedure Code. Now, when you have a look at it, section 132 and 133, which are on my slide number 29 and 30, then you will find that in 132, actually it is the women, certain women who were not or who could not come into the open because of their custom, who cannot come in the public. Those women were exempted under section 132 and section 133. The President of India, similarly, Vice President, Speaker, Minister of the Union, judges of the Supreme Court, governors, other ministers of the states, judges of the High Court were exempted under CPC. In other words, in Central Excise Act, these categories of the people covered by section 132 and 133 could not be summoned, or they were exempted subject to certain conditions. However, interestingly, under section 108 of the Custom Act, the exemption was confined only to section 132. That is the women who were not, not expected to come out in the public. And certain. However, section 133, whereby the President of India or governor or ministers, etc., or judges of the Supreme Court, High Court, those exemption was not, that exemption is not made applicable under customs. And coming back to GST, under section 70, there is no mention about any exemptions from seeking the presence under section of as provided under section 132 and 133 of the CPC. There is no mention at all if you carefully look at section 70 of the CGST Act. The question arises, in that case, can the GST officer who is invested with the power to summon any person can also summon a minister of the state or judges of the High Court or even vice president or a speaker of the house? May seem to little bit strange and far-fetched, but if we go by the strict interpretation of law, then in the absence of any specific exemptions provided under section 70, one can say that the GST officer may have the powers, this could be a debatable issue, but there is a marked difference between the language of section 14, section 108, and even now section 70. This is one aspect from the how the whole law has been structured. I'm just pointing out. Next. What is summons? Summons, in a simple words, it is an instrument used to commence a civil action or special proceeding and is intended, is issued for acquiring the jurisdiction over a party. It is a, this was some foreign American court judgment. And if you see, and in other words, there is another definition. Summons is an instrument by which a person whom it is served is asked to appear before the authority specified therein and tender evidence and produce documents or anything. So it is basically an intimation or a letter or communication, whatever you may call it. It is a written. Summons is always written. Mode of issuing the summons or mode of serving the summons can be anything. Nowadays, it can come even on the email or the by the WhatsApp also. But it is always a written instrument by which the proper officer is calling the person who is named therein to appear before him at a designated, at a specified place on the specified date and time, so as to tender evidence and produce documents or anything. And the list of the documents or records which are required to be produced are also normally always specified in the summons, in the body of the summons only. Next. The commenting on the purpose and scope of the summons, the FAQ question 31 says, Section 70 gives powers to the duly authorized CGST, SGST upon a person to serve upon a person by issuing, to call upon a person by issuing a summons, to present himself before the officer issuing the summons, to either give evidence or to produce a document or anything in any inquiry which an officer is making. So far, so good. The next part is very important. A summons to produce documents or other things may be for the production of certain specified documents or things, or for the production of all documents or things of a certain description in the possession or under the control of the person summoned. Now, the second sentence of the FAQ, if you very carefully come to see, this you will find it under section 14 of the Central Excise Act. This is not part of the section 70 at all. However, it is verbatim reproduced from section 14 of the Central Excise Act. In other words, that the summons to produce documents, why they have not included into section 70, only the lawmakers can really comment upon it. But what has been omitted from the body of the section is now actually being clarified as a FAQ. And this is the whole purpose of section 70, that then if a summons to produce documents or other things, maybe the producer. So this is the whole purpose, that basically an officer is making some inquiry in connection with the taxpayer's activities, or maybe in connection with any other taxpayer. I'll come to that point later, with any other taxpayer also. And he considers the presence of some person necessary, and accordingly he is summoning him before him to tender evidence, to give statement, and also to produce certain information or explanation or records or documents or any other things. Next. Coming to the purpose and scope of the summons. The first and foremost is, can the summons be issued to any person? This is the question which would arise in the minds of everybody. Can the summons be issued to the taxpayer and the officers of the taxpayer, or it can be issued to any person? The term word used, the phrase used is any person. And the powers of the officers or the department in calling any person by summons, whether under section 108 of the Customs Act, similar powers were there under section 14 of the Excise Act, and now under section 70 of the CGST Act, are well recognized. He can, if an officer considers it necessary, or he is of the view that a particular person may be knowing something about an offense which has been committed by any other taxpayer, by a taxpayer. The taxpayer may not have directly any connection with this person. The person concerned may not be in the employment, may not be in part of the management of that taxpayer company. But if the officer feels that this person's presence is necessary, and he has some information or explanation which would be required to ascertain or to determine or to establish the commitment of an offense by another taxpayer, then he can summon that person. In P. Rustamji case, Supreme Court, AIR 1971, Supreme Court it was a case of basically smuggling under section 108. I will be referring every now and then to section 108 of the Customs Act or section 14 of the Excise Act if required, because these are all pari materia. The provisions of section 70 of the CGST Act relating to summons, and provisions of section 108 of the Customs Act relating to summons, and similar provisions of section 14 of the Excise Act, these are all pari materia. So the principles of law which are normally laid down in the context of the section 108 would be equally applicable when we when we deliberate upon the summons related provisions of the CGST Act. Please keep it in mind. So in this case, Supreme Court in P. Rustamji case said, a person having nothing to do with the actual smuggling of goods can also be summoned in an inquiry under section 108 of the Customs Act. A custom officer making an inquiry under section 108 is not a police officer, and the person against whom the inquiry is being made is not an accused person. Two things follow from these observations of the Supreme Court. One, the summons can be issued to any person who may not have anything to do with the actual smuggling of the goods. But the officer considers it necessary that he might be able to throw some light on the smuggling activity which has taken place. in any capacity. He may not be involved. He may not be even aware of that some smuggling has taken place. Similarly, a person may not be aware of that some contravention has taken place under the GST in any manner, but he has some information which the officer says which would provide him some additional material while inquiring against that the person who has committed the offense. This judgment of the Supreme Court in Rustamji case was followed in Vittal Nathan case by Madras High Court, and again in the context of the powers to arrest by Punjab and Haryana High Court in Sunil. Now, and let me further elaborate on this. And this is what my question where I would deliberately put in this. Can a tax professional be summoned in connection with any inquiry against a taxpayer? The answer is yes. A chartered accountant, a tax professional, any other advisor can also be summoned by the officer in connection with any inquiry which he is conducting against a taxpayer. The taxpayer may or may not be the client of the tax professional, may not be the client. However, if the taxpayer is not the client of the tax professional, then obviously it will be for the officer to establish during the course of his inquiry that why he considers the presence of the tax professional necessary. But in case the tax professional has been associated with that particular client in any manner.
You eat it. I don't eat as I did.
Hello? Yeah. So if the tax professional, now let us say, today we are aware of that under GST regime, huge tax frauds are taking place. Now, when a person, the fraudster, might have taken the registration for the sole purpose of defrauding the government, which no one would be aware about, obviously. But he has applied for the registration. That registration he has applied through his tax professional, tax advisor. And after applying the registration, after obtaining the registration, he has been carrying on his nefarious activities. Now, when he is caught or department, the officer gets hint of this, such frauds are being committed by this particular taxpayer, then in connection with this, at least to the extent of registration or even to the extent of the filing of the returns, if that is also being taken care of by the tax professional, the officer can summon the person and try to ascertain the factual position. And here one need not, when person is summoned, any person who is summoned, including even the fraudster, it does not mean that the person is an accused person. If a person, one did not feel that I am guilty or I am being treated as an accused person, your presence is the presence of the person, tax professional, is considered necessary by the officer because he wants to inquire that on what basis the registration has been taken, what precautions you might have taken by applying the registration on behalf of, what information you have asked for. Did you establish the veracity? Did you try to ascertain the veracity of the information given by the officer or not, by the client party or not? Are you filing the regular returns on behalf of the party? On what basis are you filing? Are they providing you the data online, which are then on the basis of you are only filing the GSTR1 and GSTR3B? These are all the questions which can be asked by the. It need not mean the tax professional is a guilty person. But yes, so friends, I'm only giving you this one example just to point out to you that the powers of the summon vested in the proper officer are wide. It does not make it they can be abused or misused. That's a different matter. But he can inquire, he can call the tax professional also. And considering the fact that the GST is an extremely fraud-prone tax, particularly, therefore, as a professional, we need to be extremely careful about our clients' credentials with whom we are dealing. It is something like KYC. You know your client. You need to apply certain safeguards and certain fundamental, I mean, you have to adhere to certain precautions. Next. The question, generally it is issued in the name of the company. So in that case, when there is a private limited or public limited company, and if the name is not mentioned, then there are two ways. Either any authorized signatory, the person who is whose name is put as an authorized signatory for the purpose of GST, he can go and appear before the summons. Before the officer in response to the summons, or hello.
Yes, sir. Carry on, sir. We are getting
yeah,
you.
because I am getting that message on the screen about me being muted, so I was slightly concerned. Now, so therefore, whenever there is if the summons is only in the name of the company, but one thing, please remember, if there is a summons in the name of the director or in the name of the company, one need not, it is not necessary that the director should go. I'll come to that later on. Coming to who can issue summons. Section 70, as we have referred to, says that a proper officer can issue summons. Who is proper officer? Section 2, subsection 91 of the CGST Act defines the term proper officer as one who is assigned that function by the commissioner in board. While circular number 3/3/2017 issued on 5/7/2017, certain specific functions have been assigned by, and officers have been designated officers have been mentioned in that circular 3/3/2017 dated 5th July by the board, which is in the name of commissioner in the board. I mean, Commissioner Mr. Upendra Gupta, in fact, he was the commissioner at that time. And you will find that Superintendent of Central Excise, who are all now designated GST officers, Superintendent of Central Excise is the proper officer for the purposes of Section 70. In other words, the only officer who cannot issue the summons is the inspector, who is the subordinate to superintendent. But it is the superintendent who is the proper officer. Normally, you will find that it is generally believed that what a lower rank officer can do. Hello.
Yes, sir.
No, is there any? Am I clear? There is some echoing or any
sir,
problem?
No, sir. Perfect, sir.
Oh, perfect. No? Okay, thank you. So generally, we believe that what a subordinate officer can do, the higher officer can always do. But in my experience, rarely I have come across a summons which is issued by, say, a higher officer of the level of additional commissioner or joint commissioner or a commissioner. It is always superintendent, and they only issue the summons. And then internally, the entire inquiry investigation is always monitored, controlled by the higher officer. Even when it is a DGGI, it will be always the senior intelligence officer. And SIO is equivalent to the superintendent. Your jurisdictional superintendent and SIO, senior intelligence officer, are both equivalent in the rank. So it is the superintendent. Can the superintendent audit issue summons under Section 70? Suppose there is an audit by the department of the records of the SSC under GST, 17, 18, 18, 19, whatever. And during the course of audit, the audit officers intend to make some further inquiry. Can they undertake this inquiry via summons under Section 70? In my opinion, audit officers have no right to issue a summons under Section 70. When we talk about superintendent, it is the jurisdictional superintendent having the jurisdiction over the taxpayer. It is the range in which the taxpayer is registered, and it is that superintendent only who can. I'm not talking about the DGGI, that's a different matter. But jurisdictional superintendent can only issue the summons, and not the superintendent audit, he cannot issue the summons. And commissioner in the board, this is just for the slightly for academic purpose. I don't want to get into this. You will find two expressions which are separately defined. One is commissioner and another is the commissioner in the board in the CGST Act. Commissioner in the board is a new, authority which is created under CGST in the erstwhile regime of excise service tax and even under Custom Act. We don't have this particular expression commissioner in the board. And this commissioner in the board has been defined under section 291 by referring into under section 168, under subsection 168 of subsection 2 of section 168 for specific provisions which are specified in that subsection 2. Only commissioner in the board is the proper officer. This is just to give you an overall idea. Next. Is summons and notice. The one thing, friends, which I have been noticing ever since the GST has come into picture is that there is a tendency on part of the taxpayers and also on part of the majority of the tax professionals to consider every communication coming from the department as a notice. We need to psychologically come out of this. It is very easy for the taxpayer, our client, to call us up the moment he receives any communication from the department, simply saying that, "Arey sir, ये एक department से notice आया है." Because he is a taxpayer, he is not supposed to know the law. Sir, notice आया है. And when you actually have a look at it, you find that it is some communication of for some purpose with the department has issued to him. It is not a notice. When we talk about the notice, we should still our mind that notice means we will only call show cause notice under section 73 or section 74 as a show cause notice. All other are communications which are entered into by the department for any purpose. A summons is not a notice. A summons is merely an instrument or a communication addressed by a proper officer to the person specified therein, calling him to be present on the designated place at the specified time and day to tender evidence and to produce some information in whatever form. It is not a notice. And this distinction between such communication and notice, suppose there is a superintendent letter demanding something, that you have availed this ITC wrongly, or you have not paid the tax correctly, or there is a short payment of the tax or non-payment of tax for any reason. So kindly make the payment and communicate the details of the payment within 2 days. A standard communication flying around the country every now and then with interest and penalty. This is also not a notice. Audit officers make some observations, raise certain objections, raise certain demand. And those are conveyed either by way of a letter to the taxpayer or by the draft audit report, DAR, or ultimately FAR, final audit report. This is also not a notice. And it is not binding. None of such communications demanding anything or exhorting the taxpayer to make some payment are merely demand letter at first. They are not show cause notices and they are not binding. I've written my article, which, by the way, Manojji and Ragini, all these articles which I'm right now writing, kindly please share with the participants and all your members. Okay, you can share them with them. I have taken up this issue only. Like in Metal Forging Supreme Court, each and every communication from the department is not a show cause notice. A mere letter asking to pay is not a notice. Madras High Court, Ennard Steel, Supreme Court, Gokak Patel Wokart, Supreme Court, Madhumilan Syntax, 35 ALG 349. Letter seeking a reversal of Senvet credit is also not a show cause notice. Acme Manufacturing, 624 ELT. Similarly, letter communicating audit objections or asking something to pay, asking the SSC to pay any amount is also not a show cause notice. Sidwell Refrigeration, 145 ELT. So, summons is not a notice. Please remember that. Next, whether a summons does not carry the DIN, which has been introduced by the board in December 2019, by circular dated November 19, further amplified by December 19 circular, will it become invalid? In my opinion, it will become invalid and it can be challenged. So when a summons is issued which does not carry the DIN, please remember that these circulars have been issued by the board in exercise of the powers vested by the board under 168(1). And this is a binding circular on the department. And board is very clearly stated that any communication not carrying the compulsory mandatory DIN will be invalid. Though specifically in the section 70 or nowhere, it is written that without DIN, the summons will become invalid. So if the DIN is not, then what the SSC should do when the DIN is not carried? Is it that he should not reply because there is no DIN? No. So when the DIN is not mentioned, one should reply to that, but without any hesitation and without any fear, should clearly mention in the opening part of the reply that this summons does not carry the DIN as mandated by the board wide its circular number so-and-so, dated so-and-so, so-and-so, and therefore as provided by the board, the summons is invalid in the eyes of law. And then without prejudice to that contention, the rest, it can be then suitably responded. This is good. Or you can simply stop at that also if you are, and nothing wrong in that. By taking this preliminary objection, let them issue another summons with the DIN. When board has asked them to do something, they are supposed to do something. It is binding on them. Supreme Court India Cements, in the context of pre-notice consultation, you can also refer to the Delhi High Court judgment in Amadeus India's case, where the Supreme Court, the Delhi High Court has clearly touched upon the binding nature of the circular. Pre-notice consultation was never a part of the statute under excise or service tax. It was always by the circular. And still it was held to be binding in Amadeus India's case by the Delhi High Court. So, and there are umpteen number of judgments on the binding nature of the circulars. Next. Section 70, it says the inquiry which is being undertaken in terms of section 70 via summons shall be deemed to be judicial proceedings within the meaning. Now, judicial proceeding, it means that every summons you will find that there are two subsections. There is a mention at the end that your attention is always invited to section 193 and section 228 of the Indian Penal Code. In other words, if a person who is tendering the evidence in terms of the summons can be punished for giving the false evidence, and if he intentionally insults or interrupts the public servant, that is the revenue officer, the superintendent making the inquiry during the judicial proceeding, he can also be punished and he can be proceeded against criminally under section 228. Next. That brings us, so what are the responsibilities of the person so summoned? So board says a person who is issued summon is legally bound to attend either in person or through his authorized representative, and he is bound to state the truth before the officer who has issued the summon upon any subject which is the subject matter of examination, and produce such document and other things as may be required. There is a query from Manojji that is there any legal backing for DIN? It is not the question of legal backing, Manojji. When the board has issued a circular under section 168 and the power vested in the board under subsection 1 of 168 are wide enough for the carrying out the purposes of the act, and when they have specifically provided that the DIN should be mentioned and via circular which is issued, therefore that is binding on the department. Department cannot say that my board has actually provided for something which is not actually provided in law. Department is precluded from arguing against the board instructions. SSC can always challenge the board instruction or clarification if it is prejudicial to his interest. But the departmental officer cannot say that my board did not know the law and they have provided for the deal to be mentioned and I am not bound to follow it. Same thing had happened under pre-notice consultation. Pre-notice consultation was never the part of the statute, as I said earlier. And still, it was provided for via board circular, and it was held to be binding by the Delhi High Court in Amedi's case. So, coming to the present thing, that if the person summoned, he is supposed to give the state the true facts, give the correct answer, true answer, complete answer. Right? He cannot give the false answer. And that brings us to a question that what is the distinction between the statement and the confessions? Because forget about the third party. When a taxpayer is supposed summoned in connection with some offense which the officer feels he might have committed, it could be offense of any nature, it could be even the fraud also. He is now giving the statement. And during the course of statement, he says something, then he is giving the statement, and then he is actually saying something which even increment him also. He is confessing something. So what is the difference between the statement and the confession? And here one can go through this judgment of NSR Krishna Prasad. AP High Court has very clearly said that all confessions are statements, but all statements are not confessions. And there is a protection available under section 164(2) of CRPC that a warning or caution, next please, a warning or caution is required to be administered to the person concerned, clearly apprising him, clearly informing him that whatever he stated through his statement before the officer may be used against him in the legal proceedings. This warning is required to be administered by the officer, and you will now find that in the beginning of any statement, when the officer starts, they always write that a warning has been ascertained. The person concerned has been informed that whatever he now is now going to say may be used against him. There have been a catena of judicial pronouncement about the applicability of section 164. And in this context, such caution and warning is customarily always administered by the officer. Coming to, and if such warning is not administered, then the statement may become inadmissible in evidence. And then comes to the next question. Is the person obliged in law to answer every question put to him by the officer during the inquiry? Is he supposed to say the truth which will incriminate himself? What is the obligation to speak truth vis-a-vis incriminate oneself? There are judgments and judgments on this. The sum and substance of all this judgment is, and also the Supreme Court, the time is short, so I'm not going too much into the detail, but as in the Ira Advani's case, the Supreme Court said in the context of Custom Act that section 108 does not compel a person to make a statement, but if he makes a statement, he has to state the truth to avoid punishment. In Ira Advani case, Article 20, which is pertaining to 20 subclause 3, which is pertaining to the personal liberty. No person can be compelled to give evidence against himself. Article 20 of Constitution of India. No person can be compelled to give evidence against himself. And in this Ira Advani, KK Goenka case, Calcutta High Court said, custom officer is not a police officer, but the protection under Article 20 will still be available. The same principle will apply even under GST. Superintendent of GST is not a police officer, but still the protection under section 20, Article 20 will be available, and therefore a person can decline to answer any question which may incriminate himself and which violates Article 20. So the law can, the substance of this, all this judgment is that either the person can choose to remain silent, it is his right, or, but if he decides to speak, then he has to speak the truth. And here he has to take a call that what he is supposed to, what he intends to do. This will all depend upon the facts of the case, and there are many subjective factors here which are impossible to go into. We can't go into that. But this is the legal position. Next.